how the party swinging. Look how the party swinging. Look how the party swinging. Arabian music jamming. Arabian music jamming. Arabian music jamming. Let's get involved in some soca. I could be your private dancer. Come let we do a thing. Jam we body and swing. Come let we do a thing. Oh baby, baby. Oh baby, baby. Come let we do a thing. Body. And there she was standing in a corner, looking so sweet and without a partner. So I went over, I spoke to her, she smiled, and I said to her, would you like to rock it with me, baby? Would you like to jam it with me, honey? Sweet calypso, music jamming for soul. Come on, rock it with me. Somebody, he said he'd be here 7:30. I said, well darling, it's 10 o'clock now, and I have a feeling that somehow you shouldn't be alone this way. If there's no objection, I said, come and rock it with me, baby. Come and jam it with me, honey. Sweet calypso, music jamming for soul. Come and rock it with me, baby. Come and jam it with me, honey. What you want? What you want to do? What you want? What you want to do? What you want to do?
This is Caribbean Vibes.
In a party with my baby. In a party with my baby. On the block, the music in we body, and we start to rock. But the way I rockin', I give in she all. She couldn't take the jamming, and she start to fall. Oh Lord, don't rock the thing so, baby, don't rock it so. Don't rock the thing so, baby, don't rock it so. So baby, don't rock it so. Don't rock the thing so, baby, don't rock it so. Boy, I'm feeling the tempo. Don't rock the thing so, baby, don't rock it so. Oh yo yo, you're driving me loco. Don't rock the thing so, baby, don't rock it so. You don't know what you're causing, baby. We better do some posing now. The temperature is rising, honey. Don't rock me thing so, baby, don't rock it. Don't rock it so. Don't rock it so. Ah, yeah. Listen, baby, I love the way you groove. You're making me feel happy every time you move. But she couldn't measure what I'm talking about. She was under pressure and she started to show. Oh Lord, don't rock it so, baby, don't rock it so. Don't rock the thing so, baby, don't rock it so. Don't rock the thing so, baby, don't rock it so. Don't rock the thing so, baby, don't rock it so. Boy, I hit in the elbow. Don't rock the thing so, baby, don't rock it so. Oh yo yo, I spit this in me big toe. Don't rock the thing so, baby, don't rock it so. Getting hot like fire, baby. I'm starting to perspire now. You are rousing my desire, honey. Don't rock the thing so, baby, don't rock it. Don't rock it so. Don't rock it so. Ah, yeah.
This is Caribbean Vibes.
traveling the heavenly road. I'd love to take you for a ride on my silver wagon.
Hi, you're listening to Roz on radio. Join me every Tuesday from 4 and 6, where we look at life in 3D and tackle the tough topics. Good afternoon, you're tuned into Insight on Starr Radio UK with me, Roz, where we look at life in 3D, tackle the tough topics, all Good afternoon, you're tuned into Insight on Starr Radio UK with me, Roz, where we look at life in 3D, tackle the tough topics, all through the lens of the feminist perspective.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Starr Radio UK. A bit of a bumpy start, but it's going to be a bumpy topic. I want to look at terrorism today, at least in part. So, terrorism it will be.
Yeah.
Get there soon. I'm tired of being sane. me consumed. I'm headed for the brink of insanity. I can see the door not far ahead. I hope you face to take me and give me rest. I'm headed for the brink. I'm headed for the brink. I'm headed for the brink of insanity. Oh, no. I'm headed for the brink of insanity. I can see the door not far ahead. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. Door not far ahead. Tell me rest.
You're listening to Roz on Star Radio, online, on the app. Have your say. Call today 020 133 2257 or 58. Tweet at I'm Just Saying 2. IMJUSSAYIN 2. Good afternoon. Insight here with Roz. It's that time of year again, isn't it? It's September and 9/11 comes to mind. And when you think of terrorism, you always think of us saying how we're going to fight against it and it won't change our way of life. But do you ever wonder how effective terrorism is? And it's a really difficult question, and I appreciate that because it's hard to compare different types of terror. But I think about terrorism and people saying, it doesn't work. Then I line up at an airport for about 50 hours and there's all these machines and x-ray, scanners. And I can't take my contact lens fluid. I have to put them in the back of the plane, and I have to... It's just really weird, isn't it? That they say that terrorism doesn't work, and somehow or the other, the terrorism that doesn't work does have a lot of inconveniences in our life. Can you remember walking along London Bridge, not London Bridge, just in the West End, in the city, in London, and all of a sudden we've got these barriers up so that people can't drive their cars to kill us. Now, I'm not saying that's evidence that terrorism works, or it doesn't work. It's just, I think there is a cost that's attached to terrorism. And seeing these big walls, these barriers put up in London reminds me that it costs us. And lining up at the airport, that reminds me that terrorism actually costs us. So it's not something that comes to us free. The war on terror, and there's signs of terrorism all around us, but I don't believe it's won. But does terrorism, does it work? As I said, and I repeat, that's a really big question, because you've got geographical constraints you have to consider. Then you've got a lot of anecdotal information, and that's not data as such, is it? And then you have to look at it, is terrorism, is it international? On that question, I say no. I think the vast majority of terrorism is localized. If you think about it, it's civil wars that are being fought for territorial control. Now, don't get me wrong. Many of these intractable conflicts have the fingerprint or the stamp of the USA in its... So whether we're talking about ISIS or Iraq or Syria or Boko Haram insurgency in Nigeria, And is it El Shabab terrorism in Somalia and Kenya? Then you got the Yemen civil war. Then you got the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's a lot. It is a lot. I would say, and feel free to disagree with me, I'm just saying 2. IMJUSSAYIN with the number 2. So jump onto Twitter. I guess if I'm looking at it for a shorthand answer, I would say no. The disadvantages of terrorism outweigh its advantages. And this is where some of you listeners may get upset with me, because I think that some of the virtues of the West far outweigh terrorism. Let me explain what I mean. I think there's something very beautiful about living in a Western society where you can actually have people, everyday people, being part of the process that tells us how we want to live our lives. It's not dictated from on high. It's not dictated by God. It's not a scripture. It's not a rule of law where the status, the hierarchy is actually defined by a book, or indeed defined by a family. Listen, we can come back and argue about the royals in a minute, but for the moment, by and large, the Western societies have fought so that ordinary people have a say in how their societies are run. Women, we're not equal yet, and you know that. You know if you're listening to the show on the regular, and you should be, 4 to 6 every Tuesday right here on Starr Radio UK, then you know that women, we got about 300 years to go before we get anywhere near equality, but we do have more rights here. And I think there is something about freedoms in the West, as well as the economic freedoms. And I don't want to get those two confused because they can be questionable. But there is something about the values of the West that I think are really important, and that more people want above what terrorism offers. So if you look at conflicts, you'll find they're either fizzling out, or there's stalemate on one side, or they're trying to negotiate a settlement. And I think it will always be hard to eliminate terrorism completely. But, and this is an important but, it depends what one's calling terrorism. Now, I don't want to get too much into a debate because I don't want to lose us. By and large, I think what's happening where we are in the world, where we are as human beings, where we are when we're looking at societies at the moment, is we have so many people who want to control us. And I find that really difficult, because I think we should be allowed to live freely. Now, if we're fighting from somebody who's come and invaded our land, that's not terrorism, that's freedom fighting. So I would never have called somebody like Mandela a terrorist. I think the description doesn't fit what was happening. The South Africans wanted their country back. They wanted to rule their land. You had foreigners in their country, making them second and third class citizens. At one point, they were even subhuman. So I get that. But there are people who feel it's their right to tell other people how to live, who want to engage in a system that is oppressive, that is discriminatory against civilian targets, because they want to satisfy their political purposes. So does terrorism work is the fundamental question that I'm looking at today. Or should I say I'm just looking at terrorism. And on the one hand, I do get concerned. I really do get concerned about the level of individuals that, I don't get it, that want to cause trouble in the centre of London. And I wonder if they are actually mentally troubled. I wonder if there's deeper symptoms to it, because I don't get the cause. I get confused about people who say that they are jihadists, that they want to take us back to a time where we have even less rights than we have now. I don't see why they think that their view, their purpose is more important than what the majority wants. I don't understand why they want to wage war on the West. I get people's dissatisfaction with British foreign policy. I get that. There are lots of aspects of foreign policy that I'm not happy with. But does blowing up people at home actually change that foreign policy? If you look at what's happening in the Yemen, children are dying. It's a war that's being waged by Saudi Arabia, for which we are supplying the arms and the money. That's what's happening there. Boko Haram, I think it actually stands for Against Western Education. Why is it that they don't want people to be educated? What's the harm? One doesn't necessarily have to accept everything that comes out of Western education. There are aspects of the West which are exceptional. I do like the idea of freedom for people. And there's more freedom in the West than in a lot of places, though I'm beginning to wonder about that. So, in terms of terrorism, though, does it give people more freedom? Why do we want to blow up people so we take away more rights? This is the bit that I don't get. But not all terrorism is about that. I don't understand why Boko Haram, that's the conflict that's happening with people who are of Islamic faith in northern Nigeria. For those of you who are tuned in, not quite sure what Boko Haram about. And they don't believe in Western education. And I wonder, do they get followers because the people there feel so distant from the political system? Or is it that they honestly believe that what is being fed to them via these individuals is true? Strange one, isn't it? Let's take a break and we'll come back and we'll visit it. You're listening to Insight with Roz on Starr Radio, tackling the tough topics.
I mean it so from the bottom of my heart. I'm telling you truthfully, truthfully, baby. So that's something in your eyes. Comes to no surprise that you turn me oh so giddy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love you. Tell me that you love me too. Yeah, yeah. I love you. Tell me that you love me too. Okay, and I talk for a little while about your unique style and the way your very presence, girl, well it moves me, moves me. You send my passion level so high that I'm happy when I'm here with you. I said that I love you so, and I mean it so from the bottom of my heart. I'm telling you truthfully, truthfully, baby. present skirt, well, it moves me, moves me. You send my passion level so high, that I'm happy when I'm here. Withdrawing down without you. Baby, 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 can you hear me say, I love you? Tell me that you love me too. Yeah, yeah. I love you. Tell me that you love me too. Giving you something more, something special to remember. Giving you something more, something special to remember. Something more, something special to remember. That's right. Something more, something special.
You're listening to Roz on Star Radio, online, on the app. Have your say. Call today 020 133 2257 or 58. Tweet at I'm Just Saying 2. IMJUSSAYIN 2. Good afternoon, Star Radio UK. Roz with you up until the hour of 6. So we're looking at terrorism. Only because of 9/11 and it's that time of year. Well, I think we should look at it anyway to just see some of the controls that it has in our life. I want to come back to you because there's something I'm a little bit skeptical about when we talk about controls and terrorism. But before I get back there, and we will come back to it, before I get back there, I just want to I want to share a survey with you. Page 14, Fortana did a survey. She looked at 104 rebel groups fighting in large civil wars, all of them since 1989. Among them, organisations that engaged in systematic discrimination, violence against civilians for their own purposes. And what was interesting about her research is that non-terrorist movements are far more likely to win a settlement or an outright victory, while terrorist movements tend to lose, fizzle out or drag on. And I quote her here: of the groups examined here, none of those that deliberately killed large numbers of civilians through terrorist attacks won its fight outright, Fortner writes. So, what kind of rebel groups win civil wars? Government victories, ones with low activity, ones with ongoing fights, those in agreements. And do you know what? Rebel victories. Do you know what the biggest one is? So let me give them to you again. You've got government victories, you've got low activity, terrorism, you've got ongoing battles, you've got agreement, and then you've got rebel victories. Of all of those civil wars, which group do you think won the most? The non-terrorist groups that had agreement. That's it. Far above any of the other groups. Non-terrorist groups that came to an agreement. What terrorism does, well, is to prolong wars, as they have the heavy cluttering around and they've got these little bits of activity and it just keeps on and on going. That appears to demonstrate why groups might turn to terror and why the strategy falters. So you've got a little bit of blowing up that might waken people up, then it stops, then you've got a bit more and then it drags on and on and on. And of course, when you're doing all of that, you're actually bringing civilians into the mix. Now, one of my concerns, and this is where I was starting, is when we look at terrorism, and I do find this a little bit frightening, so bear with me on it. I don't always trust government. You see, I think, especially here in the West, we don't hold our governments to account enough. And what they're trying to do is get away with more and more rules and restrictions being put on us. And I don't think we fight that. Don't think we fight that well enough. And I think that's something that we need to do. We need to look at some of the restrictions that are put in place and ask ourselves, are they reasonable? Some of the rights that they want, a couple of shows ago, quite a few shows ago, we were talking, and one of the things that I raised at the time is that they want to bring in this whole thing about people having identity to vote. What kind of nonsense is that? We don't have a high enough turnout rate. Now they're trying to bring in identity cards. We don't have identity cards in this country, and I think we should guard against it. And using things like immigration and terrorism is a way to sneak it through the back door. Back to what we were saying on terrorism. So that was my but. You always have to ask why the government is doing what it's doing. But by and large, terrorism simply doesn't work. Yes, it makes wars longer. It lengthens the lifespans of groups that are engaging in it. One reason for this is that it's hard for authorities to stamp out a terror campaign. Where's my water? This is the problem. But it's also very hard for terrorist groups to capture and hold territory, and a central goal in the civil war. So, what did 9/11 achieve? I think in many ways the damage of 9/11 was to give Muslims a bad name. I think in many ways the damage in 9/11 are some of the constraints that have been put upon passengers moving around the world. I think one of the downsides of 9/11 were easier to trace, but we then walk around with these mobile devices which basically tells anybody where we are at any point in time if they wanted to know. So terrorism, and I'm not saying it's not complex, but terrorism doesn't actually work. What it does, and I find this unfortunate, it gives the government leverage to behave badly. But most of the time, and this is one of the studies that you can look at for yourself. In fact, do you know what I need to do? I'm actually going to tell you the study. It's with the Cambridge Corp, so you've got to go to Cambridge University Press, and it's actually called Do Terrorists Win? Rebels, Use of Terrorism and Civil War Outcomes, and it's by Virginia Page Fortner. So it is well worth the read. It is, let's have a look. It came out a few years ago. It's volume 69, issue 3, but it's actually worth a read because I know we're at the 9/11 time in history where we're all looking at it and it's a talking point, but terrorism for me doesn't actually win. I think what it does is it gives the governments another excuse to clamp down on its citizens. But I've looked at that. We'll come back to that. So if it doesn't win, I suppose we need to look at what does success mean, or success for whom. So looking at the groups that I have found successful, and this is based on Fortner's work, success from this point of view is the overall cause and the results that the non-terrorist group get. Whether it's a success from the point of the terrorist is always questionable, because the terrorist can say, well, we've only got this change because we started the action in the first place. But I think, again, we have to be very careful about what we mean by terrorist. So I'll refer you. Rescuing your land from people who have taken it is not terrorist activity. Getting into a fight in order to have political control with the same people, I perceive as terrorist activity if you are killing those people in order to force the population to behave in a certain way, to follow a certain code. For me, non-terrorists will always be successful if they have the majority of the people on their side who want a freer life. You see, for me, people actually just want to get on with their lives. So ultimately, the idea of terrorism usually fails. At best, terrorism is a stalling tactic. Anyway, let's go back to the impact of America post 9/11 and their war on terror. It's actually quite staggering when you look at it. regardless of which estimate you want to look at, would you believe me if I said it cost 1.6 trillion? Okay, 5 trillion? Not a lot between them, is there? Shall I say that again? Between 5 to 1.6 trillion. That's not including the psychological and civil liberties cost of fighting terrorism. That's the fear that's generated by terrorism, and fear is the main tool of terrorism. There has been a cost. America is in a state of elevated anxiety. And as I said, consequently, people are persuaded to surrender their civil liberties. They haven't looked at the fact that terrorism is unlikely to work. They have been put into a state of terror, and that is to the government's advantage. So, to me, what policymakers can do is use terrorism as a wonderful little weapon to actually get what they want. Have you ever noticed this about American politics? You always know the right from the left in America, because the right wing, this is the Republicans, they always talk about the Constitution. They are obsessed by the Constitution, yet they're always trying to undo it and take away liberties and rights. So policymakers know that they can use terrorism, just like they do immigration, as a weapon against people. The United States is currently directly involved in two long wars, Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan. That's three, isn't it? And has interests and lesser involvements in plenty of others. Knowing terrorists are unlikely to win these conflicts doesn't provide any guidance for how to speed up the process of ending them. It doesn't offer any solutions, but it doesn't do anything about the value in terms of humanitarian intervention. Faulkner actually wrote, "If I had to draw out simple lessons from my research for policymakers as they try to make calculations, it would be this. A, these wars are likely to be long, and this is probably true whether we were involved or not. That would be the United States, not the UK. And B, don't overestimate the potential for successive groups that use terrorism. That is, don't let the bogeyman of terrorism lead to an overestimation of their military capability." And I agree with her. It just seems to me that terrorism, and I'm not for one moment suggesting that terrorism is a good thing, but it just seems to me, that we shouldn't guard against it. But it just seems to me we take an awful lot of time and energy and pains to put things in place to defend against something that can actually fizzle out. It seems to me that we take huge steps to deal with terrorism when the people on the ground will do some of the work to stop it. Now, I'm not saying for one moment that what went on in Iraq wasn't awful, or what's going on in Syria isn't bad. It's not. This isn't condoning terrorism, and don't take it that way. But I don't think we understand and appreciate the true cost of terrorism, or the fact that terrorism won't win, because most people don't want to live the way that terrorists suggest. And I think not enough conversation and debate is had around this. I think we just see something happening and think, scared, put the barriers up, take away the civil liberties, give me identity cards, do this. These are some of the things that governments want to do anyway. And when we turn around and we surrender our rights to them, when we put our hands up and say, yes, I'm scared, take away my civil liberties, we're not actually fighting terrorism, we're fighting our own governments. We're giving them that they are not entitled to. So that's my problem with it. That's why I think we need to think very carefully at this time. Think very carefully about those little bottles that they tell us we can't take on planes. You know, those tiny little bottles. Because of what you might do. Things like my contact lens solution that has to go in the hold. Taking off your shoes at the airport. The whole way you're treated. I mean, don't get me wrong, you get some really nice assistance at the airport. But I don't think they're terror-based. I think they're more government-based. I think there's something terribly frightening about the way our governments use the fear given by terrorism to actually control us. I think that's more frightening than terrorism, and we don't even recognise it. I mean, terrorism, there's still more chance of you being run over than being blown up by a bomb in this country. Now, that's different in other countries. And again, I did say when we started talking about this, that a lot of terrorism are localised civil wars. Would you have Boko Haram if money was better spent in Nigeria? I don't know. But I think that's a question that needs to be answered. And remember, it's the north of Nigeria. Nigeria is a vast country. And it's almost like Boko Haram have been left to get on with what you're doing up there. That's an idea, not a fact. But it almost seems that we're not jumping in on Boko Haram. I don't understand why they're not. Maybe terrorism excites people, I don't know. But terrorism cannot win. It hasn't won. It's not sustainable. What we have to look at is the way the governments want to use terrorism in order to control our lives. You're more likely to be stung by a bee and die than you are a terrorist bomb in the United States of America. I'm going to leave it there for a moment. Let's do some music back after this. You're listening to Insight with Roz on Starr Radio, tackling the tough topics.
You say you love the way I smile, my impeccable style. My body is ridiculous and could I stay a while? You know I like you, no denial, so all of that's cool to me. But when you tell me I'm the truth, you wanna show me proof. I'm always in the booth and I should cut my niggas loose. Now that makes me recluse and think, what are you playing at? Hey boy, you know I got groupies. Brothers use music to pursue me. I don't wanna be mean, so I'ma come clean and let you know I've got groupies. Brothers use music to pursue me. I don't wanna be mean, so I'ma come clean and let you know I'm not your girl. No, no, no. I'm not your girl. No, no, no. I'm not your girl. No, no, no. I'm not your girlfriend. No, no. Now when you say you love my song, we go and hit a bong, and baby we just get along. You know that there is nothing wrong, cause all of that's great to me. Oh, but when you're telling me already you don't wanna take it steady, you're looking for a flat that we can share up in Chelsea. I'm thinking, is he okay? Cause clearly you're mad. Now boy, you know I've got groupies. Brothers use music to pursue me. I don't wanna be mean, I'ma come clean and let you know I've got groupies. Brothers use music to pursue me. I don't wanna be mean, I'ma come clean and let you know I'm not your girl. No, no, no. I'm not your girl. No, no, no. I'm not your girl. No, no, no. I'm not your girlfriend.
Phone again. LOL. Is it the same guy? I don't know why I didn't get the message. Like, it's just so clear.
You must be leading him on.
No, I'm not. No, Ray, I swear to you, I'm not leading him on. So why is he calling you? I don't know. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. It goes straight to voicemail and he's still ringing me. He records your voicemail. I bet he records your voicemail. What do they say? Like, where you at?
If I've said I'm busy
Yeah.
and not giving you a reason, it means I don't want to meet. It is code for. Why don't they get it though? Why don't they? Point number one: do not excessively call me.
If I have not called you back yet,
Don't call me.
don't call me.
Don't call
I'm
me.
busy.
I bitch is busy. Yeah.
Like, I might be busy chilling.
I might be with another man.
I'm just too busy for you right now.
I'm too busy for you.
Don't call me back yet. It's not time.
Not
Wait,
time yet.
wait.
I haven't read the WhatsApp. Don't send a question mark. Yes.
Oh my
Don't send the question mark?
all the time.
Why? For why?
What?
For why?
Questioning me about your question.
Don't use me as your DP.
They think it's cute. It's not cute.
I don't want to be Bay of the Week. Bay of the Month.
I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm tired of it. Why?
You're listening to Insight with Roz on Starr Radio, tackling the tough topics. Hi, you're listening to Roz on Starr Radio. Join me every Tuesday from 4 until 6 where we look at life in 3D and tackle the tough topics.
I don't get the question, baby. I don't get the question. Are you asking if I love you? Are you saying you don't know by now? You should never wonder, baby. You should never wonder, 'cause I need you more than ever. We will always be together, yeah. You control my heart, feel you in the very air that I breathe. You're such a man, I need you with me. And when the world seems hard, you protect me like a man does a child. With them big old arms, oh no, you don't ever have to wonder. You're my knight in shining armor, you're my heart. I'm proud to say I love you, I love you, I need you. I wanna spend forever together. My partner can't live a day without you. I love you, I need you. I wanna spend forever together. Leave never, can't live a day without. I can see the day we met, I can see it clearly. The first day of my new life, I knew I would be your wife. Yeah, always heard of love at first sight, but it was kinda silly. How could a love shine on a stranger? Love comes on a little stronger. Oh no, you shot me with that arrow. I could barely catch my breath. You could scare me half to death. Oh yes, you came running and enslaved me with the love no other man could ever give me. I wanna say I love ya, I love ya, I need ya. I wanna spend forever together. My partner can't live a day without ya. I love ya, I need ya. I wanna spend forever together. Leave never, can't live a day without ya. I love ya.
You're listening to Roz on Starr Radio, online, on the app. Have your say. Call today 020 133 2257 or 58 tweet at I'm Just Saying Too. IMJUSSAYIN2. Well, that was a bit embarrassing, wasn't it? Hearing my alarm going off in the background. Gotta take the meds. What can I tell you? But whilst I did that, you had the pleasure of listening to Kina, one of the best albums around. You know that if you listen to this show regularly, but better still, go and buy it. Absolutely love her. She came from Brownstone and I am all over that album, all over it. So we've had a look at terrorism. I hope I've given you some food for thought on terrorism. I really do. I really, really do. Because I don't think we actually talk about it enough. And when better than around this 9/11 time? Do I just sit back and just say, well, terrorism, what has it done? How has it affected our lives? And most of it is the government bringing in restrictions. And if you look at the countries where terrorism is happening, they're not even winning in their own countries. Prolonged wars, prolonged agony, but they're not getting the final result. So that was looking at terrorism. Now, come on, I'm a black female political pundit, so you know we have to go there, right? Brexit. When we accepted the vote, this stupid referendum that was not binding, that somehow the other people want to say is binding. Have you noticed everyone says, oh, it's the referendum, it's binding, right? It's binding. Has anybody thought about the fact that the 73 referendum, if it was 73, whenever they had that referendum, that was binding too, but it didn't stop members of the Tory party wanting to jump up and down and get wild, did it? They have been fighting for 40 years, you know, to take us out of Europe. And the day when we had that vote 2 years ago, do you know people made millions because they shorted the pound? Well, Jacob Rees-Mogg, you know that, and he's a very lovely man in terms of manners. I love manners. Oh my goodness, you know I could fall in love with somebody if they've got good manners. Intelligence and good manners and caring for the for older people. Oh God, you got my heart. You got my heart. Anyway, Rees-Mogg has very good manners, and I have nothing against the man personally, but I don't like his politics. And politics is the name of the game. And I just think that, you know, he pops up. Remember, he's not a member of the cabinet. He's not a member of the front bench. He's basically a backbench conservative who jumps up and down all the time and talks about Brexit. Well, I think we need to talk about him. You've got Sajid Javid, the Home Secretary, who's refused to rule out civil disorder leading to widespread unrest following a no-Brexit deal. But what people are not talking about, and you know what, this is something a little bit like terrorism, isn't it? With terrorism, we don't actually talk about the fact that it's scare tactics and terrorism doesn't work. What we say is terrorism and we have a load of laws passed. Well, we've got exactly the same problem with Brexit. Because if we have a no-deal outcome, guess what? Hedge fund bosses could make billions. And guess whose name's about to come up? Jacob Rees-Mogg. The Sunday Telegraph revealed that hedge fund bosses are, and I quote, waging billions on a slump in the pound triggered by a no-deal Brexit. One of the key players in the game is, and this is according to the Telegraph, Crispin Oddy. Now this is where your Twitter comes in handy, because if you check out this guy on Twitter, you'll find a very interesting feed. Crispin Oddy, who bankrolled the Brexit campaign, made 220 million by shorting the pound on the night of the referendum. Did you hear that? Rich people are getting richer whilst we lose regulation and things that actually help us. Crispin Oddy paid £1 million for the Leave campaign. He has 3 billion riding on short selling our futures. Check out Mark Alexander, again, Twitter. Now you all know about Gina Miller because she was fighting this. She was one of, I think, 3 people who were fighting the government on saying we need a right to reply. Gina Miller says, greedy Brexiteer wager 3 billion on the pound plunging this year and no deal Brexit fears. They get filthy rich on people's misery. People who will see every part of their lives get more expensive if this happens. Crispin Oddy. He banked Brexit and he made a load of money. You can't make this stuff up. Oddy invested close to 1 million in the Leave campaign, or 1 million. He also paid £6,000 to help re-elect Jacob Rees-Mogg in the 2017 election. Remember I tell you about the closeness of the relationship of these people? Not playing with you when I tell you. Oddy invested £1 million in the Leave campaign. He paid £6,000 to help re-elect Jacob Rees-Mogg in the 2017 election. But his links to Rees-Mogg don't end there, because the Somerset capital management and investment firm set up by Rees-Mogg, quote, initially operated under the wing of Oddy's hedge fund, Oddy Asset Management, or Oddy Asset Management. The Guardian reports, Rees-Mogg is a non-executive chair at SMC and is paid £14,000 a month for working 30 hours. You may not have heard that, so I want to just run it by you again. Mogg is a non-executive chair at SMC and is paid about £14,000 a month for 30 hours a month. He works 30 hours a month and he gets £14,000. Don't you wonder why these people want you to have Brexit? Why they push this campaign? I mean, I am very concerned that laws were broken, and as far as I'm concerned, the whole thing should be called off. But if we call it off, we might get civil unrest. If we go ahead with no Brexit deal, we might have civil unrest. I don't get it. I really don't get it. This whole idea of foreigners being these really bad people. That's why we're leaving Brexit. And when you look at the EU rules, it's the EU rules that are causing problems. I don't get it. They don't cause problems. They protect us. But somehow or the other, and I find this really frustrating, that we listen to people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and we think, yeah, he's cool. He's the dude. We will listen to him. The man is raking it in. And by shorting the pound, they're making more money. So we end up with less employment in this country. We end up with more expensive food prices. We end up with less employment rights. We've even got the Human Rights Act being threatened like we're not human beings. And somehow or the other, these guys are still running the show. Listen, Oddy's investment doesn't stop there. Because as well as funding Rees-Mogg, Oddy is a significant Conservative Party donor. But he's also one of UKIP's most high-profile backers, and reportedly gave UKIP, £22,000 in 2014 when Farage ran the party. Mogg is allegedly called UKIP. Rees-Mogg allegedly called UKIP, and I quote, the natural allies of the Conservatives. And when Oddy and his mates made millions following the referendum vote, there was widespread speculation that Farage may have used the results from private polls to help short profits. I mean, come on. Somebody tell me why. Why? We've got this fascination with people like Rees-Mogg, who has so much already. We want to give him everything, including our human rights. Chap I follow, called Mr. Ethical, is, let me get this right, at NW_Nicholas. Follow him. The man is bang on point. He says Crispin Oddy, who made £220 million shorting the Brexit pound, was an investor in Rees-Mogg's company. Get it now? It's Brexit fraud. This is what we should be talking about as individuals. Come on, look at where we are at the moment, seriously. First of all, these very same people went on and on and on and on about we want a Switzerland deal, we want a Norway style deal. Now they condemn the notion. And all we get pushed with at the moment is no deal. That's all we're getting at the moment. No deal. We don't want a deal. And slowly but surely we're supposed to be buying into this. Why? Leaving Europe is economic uncertainty. It is disruption. It takes away our rights. And all you get is people like Audi, Rees-Mogg, Farage, people who already have money, taking more money from us, making our lives more expensive and taking away our rights. To me, it's an uncomfortable situation that exists between these three men. I'm downright sceptical about the situation that exists between these three men. You've got the ultra right or the far right or whatever you want to call them, but they're right and it's quite ugly what they stand for. People like Steve Bannon, Farage and Rees-Mogg, they're all in bed together. So you've got Theresa May, and don't forget we've got Boris in the background doing a wonderful sabotage job. But to my mind, when you look at these people and what they represent, I just have to ask you, why is it that we're even having a debate about Brexit? Why are we not at the stage where we are saying, no more, back after this? You're listening to Insight with Roz on Starr Radio, tackling the tough topics.
This love of mine, yes, it is showing. can't keep you to myself. Got to share you with another. Got to share you with someone else. It's growing, this love inside of me. Oh, and it's showing, shining so bright. It's growing, there's a love of mine. Yes, and it's showing, just can't hide. Come on, my brothers and sisters, let's not whisper time.
Now if love was a thing that money could buy, the rich got love, while the poor got a lot of hate, as I would say, you know. So man, enjoy yourself, it's late to die and think, cause I would tell you, you know. Ha 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 ha. So it's there. When we say, that's how we stay. And so we stay. And so we stay. And so we stay as I would say. So come on down the way, so we stay. So we stay. My so we stay. And so we stay. So you said you. And so I said she. And so you say you. So we stay. And I would play. Wow, baby, so we stay as I would really stay. And so we stay. And I would say, tell you about the song on the wheel, come on down with me. So alone, yeah. And so you got no one to call you own. I saw we stay. I saw we stay. I saw we stay. Money in my one-on-one. And so we stay. One-on-one make two, and I would never make you blue. If you be true, and I would never turn my back on you. And so it's me. So it's woman. Touch it, touch it, touch it, touch it. Tell you. And so we stay. And so we stay. Tell you. Touch it, that's so we stay. Oh, so we stay. Ain't that the shame? And so you got no one to blame. So when you do the thing to be ashamed, you got no one to blame. Not at all. Cause you're the one to blame. So you have got to go around the bend and hide your face. Cause you are out of this race. So it's still. So it's still. And when I tell you about us all a little we are so we stay. So we stay. And so we stay. And so we stay. One-on-one, brother. One-on-one, yeah.
Hi, you're listening to Roz on Star Radio. Join me every Tuesday from 4 until 6 where we look at life in 3D and tackle the tough topics. Good afternoon, Star Radio UK. Roz with you up until the hour of 6. It's 17:23. I love reggae and I wanted to share some reggae with you. I also wanted to play some reggae. I've got loads of the stuff. Love reggae music. Because I don't know how many of you actually watched the Andrew Marr show on Saturday. I beg your pardon, on Sunday. It's quite interesting to hear Home Secretary Sajid Javid speak. Let me see if I can get the clip up for you.
We've talked about people who are wrongly arrested and deported, but there's an even bigger number, we think, who have lost lots of other things. They might have lost their access to housing, they've lost their access to banking, they haven't been able to work, their lives have been turned upside down. What about them?
It's right that in any case, if people have been wrongly affected in the ways that you described, that we need to help them, and that's why.
Do you know how many we're talking about? For instance, how many people have been denied NHS treatment because of the Windrush scandal?
I don't think we know exactly how many yet, but we set up a
Roughly.
Windrush. We don't have an exact number on that, and I wouldn't even want to guess what that is.
You heard correctly, right? That's the Home Secretary admitting that the government has no idea how many Windrush citizens have been denied NHS treatment or anything else. This is a week after it was revealed that 3 wrongly deported Windrush citizens died waiting to return to the United Kingdom. Whilst we're in a flurry about Brexit, how to make rich people even richer, and dear black people, some of you voted for that. Do you know what? One day we're going to get these lines open. I'm going to ask you, why did you vote for Brexit? While that's happening, we've had 3 black people who have died, 3 West Indians, 3 people like me who have died, right? Because they were wrongly deported. So there you are, having the Home Secretary say, well, I've got no idea, mate. I don't know what's going on. He's struggling to find out what's happening to the citizens of Windrush. We're not even talking about Windrush. Do you know what we're talking about? Remember last week when I started the show? And I was hopping up and down because I've been off the political diet for a bit, just take foot off the break, sit back, haven't been on Twitter, just sitting back a bit at the moment. Don't worry, I'm coming back, and let me tell you, I'm coming back full pelt, but there's method in my madness, and you will all find out about that down the road. Right now, I've just eased back. You don't want to listen to the news and all that stuff before you go to bed. It'll disturb you. Those people are just out there to make you scared. So, all I hear about when I come back now, I turn on the news, Jeremy Corbyn is an anti-Semite. No, he's not actually. No. He might say the wrong things as an activist, but he's not an activist anymore. He's now the leader of the Labour Party, but he's not an anti-Semite. And when they're not trying to convince you he's anti-Semite, they're trying to put forward an argument that he doesn't understand anti-Semitism. Therefore, he's not educated enough to lead the party. Therefore, he's not educated enough to be the PM. Nah, not buying that one either. But what's really going on is the Conservatives are in bed with their good friends to try and stop regulation. Remember, whether or not they are for or against Brexit, the principles of Conservative politics is small government. They do not believe in welfare states. They do not believe that the government should be there to spend money on the people. They don't believe that. That's not what they believe in. I don't believe charity should be left to individual people or companies. The government has a duty, and this is my philosophy. These are the principles that I live by. I think we pay taxes so the government support those in society who are in need. Now, before anybody jumps out of their chair whilst they're listening to me and say, oh, everybody's on benefit. The biggest benefits go to companies who don't pay the corporation tax. Each and every one of us who is knocking on the door 9 to 5, out comes the money, PAYE. We don't get not to pay our taxes, nor should we. We don't want hungry children in this country. We don't want men abusing women and then those children being abused in turn. We don't want that. That's not the society we want to live in. If that's the society you want to live in, you shouldn't even be tuning into my program. We want good, kind, loving, caring people. We want a society where we care about people. We want a society where the government says, oops, we sent the darkies home and we didn't mean to. We sent the wrong ones. Because let's face it, the Conservative government, from where I'm sitting, don't seem to care too much about people with my skin tone. I don't think there's any respect for black people in the Conservative Party. I really don't. And then you have the secretary.
You've talked about people who are wrongly arrested and deported, but there's an even bigger number, we think, who have lost lots of other things. They might have lost their access to housing, they've lost their access to banking, they haven't been able to work, their lives have been turned upside down. What about them?
It's right that in any case, if people have been wrongly affected in the ways that you described, that we need to help them, and that's why.
Do you know how many we're talking about? For instance, how many people have been denied NHS treatment because of the Windrush scandal?
I don't think we know exactly how many yet, but we set up a
Roughly.
Windrush. We don't have an exact number on that, and I wouldn't even want to guess what that is.
I wouldn't want to guess either. I wouldn't want to guess. So they may have lost their access to housing. Have you any idea how much it costs to live in London? And then, if it's not bad enough, they might not have access to housing. Oh no, it doesn't stop there. They may have lost access to banking. So you're not even going to have a facility where you can say, listen, I'm going to borrow a bit of money until I get myself back on my feet. We're talking about our older black people here. We're talking about people who came over here and worked all their lives. Don't you get upset? This is what we have to do. We have to sit down as individuals and decide what our agendas should be. For me, Brexit shouldn't be on the agenda. This government has done nothing but create a hostile environment. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about some of that. Let me go to a bit of music because, oh, yeah, words fail me. You're listening to Insight with Roz on Starr Radio, tackling the tough topics. Hi, you're listening to Roz on Starr Radio. Join me every Tuesday from 4 until 6 where we look at life in 3D and tackle the tough topics. Hi, you're listening to Roz on Star Radio. Join me every Tuesday from 4 until 6 where we look at life in 3D and tackle the tough topics. Good afternoon, Star Radio. Roz with you. Oh, that's D'Angelo. You know I'm in love with D'Angelo. By the way, the one and only Ms. Lauren Hill is going to be here in December. Oh, arts exhibitions and events. Okay, smoothly run over that one. Lauren's going to be here. Last time I saw Lauren, listen, she's going to be here. Make your mind up. That's all I'm going to say on that. I want to go back to this whole thing with Windrush, because I don't want us to forget. You know, Star Radio UK, we're an African Caribbean station, so we got to talk about this. Immigration Act 2014 required the NHS to clamp down on providing services for illegal immigrants. Do you know what? A lot of these people weren't illegal immigrants. They came here. They came here under Windrush. They came here when they had a right to be here. And then we turn around and we say to them, oh, guess what? We don't care. The Act, this is the Immigration Act 2014, pushes the NHS to check patients have the correct documentation to be in the UK legally. Little black me. What? Because of my skin colour, I'm not supposed to be here. Born and bred, darling, born and bred. These people, when I say these people, I'm talking about Western people. I'm talking about people that came from the Caribbean. I'm talking about people who came from Africa, came here legitimately, came here rightfully. I'm talking about our seniors. And they have the damn cheek to deny them service in this country. And you got black conservatives. Darling, if you're a black conservative, you got a problem. You have a problem. Windrush citizens are entitled to free NHS care. However, historical errors meant the Home Office failed to keep accurate records. Why? Because they're black. Why do we need to keep accurate records? Only when we're cutting and planting the sugar, kept accurate records then, eh? Buying and selling, had accurate records then. The Home Office also failed to issue Windrush citizens with sufficient paperwork to prove their legal status. We shouldn't have to prove our legal status. This comes back to what I'm saying. That when we look at politics, we have to get underneath what is being said and look at who is sending the message. Whether you're talking about terrorism or you're talking about Brexit, look at who's sending the message and why they're doing what they're doing. This is about controlling. And one of the beautiful things about the West, one of the things that's exceptional about the West, is our ability to live free lives. But every time I hear Republican and Constitution, every time I hear Conservative and Brexit, all I hear is deregulation. And when we say deregulation, we're talking about less protections for the people. We need protecting from the government. We need protecting from Jacob Rees-Mogg. We need protecting from Theresa May and her hostile environment that allowed our seniors to be deported. 3 of them have died abroad. I don't want to hear about Jeremy Corbyn being anti-Semite day after day after day after day after day, week after week after week after week after week, as if the man is some kind of idiot. What I want to know is what is happening to the black people who came here legitimately. Why it is that now you're not deporting us. What you're saying is that my seniors are not allowed to have access to the NHS. They're not allowed to have access to banking. You put in a system in place that was designed to undermine. Before the 2014 Immigration Act, it was possible that Windrush citizens without documentation could claim free NHS care. The Act has changed that around. This is Theresa May's hostile environment. This is the whole problem. We have the power to vote. The Tories' attitude towards West Indians, the Tories' attitude towards the Windrush generation is no less than callous and contemptible. That's how we're being treated. We need to make some noise. And we need to make noise at the ballot box. Every time somebody says that you need identity to go to the ballot box, you need to shout out as a people and say, no, we don't want that. Because if we can't even get access to the NHS, how are we going to vote for these people to make sure they're out of power? Can you see how this works? I find it really frustrating. I find it frightening that here we are as, okay, I'm born and bred Brit, but my parents came over here. I don't want my parents and my parents' generation being denied the healthcare they need. I don't want them being denied banking. I don't believe the Tories. I have no confidence in the Conservative government. And that's just two things we've spoken about today. We've spoken about Brexit and who's making money and who's in bed with the Tory party. And how these bankers and hedge funders and how they donate money to the Tories and to UKIP, everything so that anything that people get, rights that we've fought for in this country over hundreds of years, just get eroded. Under the guise of, oh, it's Eastern Europeans. This isn't about Eastern Europeans. This is about a handful of people wanting to actually come together to tell us what we can and cannot do and how we must live like peasants whilst they feel good taking that belongs to us. And it's exactly the same principle when you look at Windrush. If people weren't going on about race in this country, Theresa May would never have created a hostile environment. But they want power. And one way to get power when things are a little bit shaky is to use race. And we're actually going to finish, I can't believe it's 1741, we're actually going to finish today's topic on race, but not race here. Race in the United States of America. Please, darling people, listen. If you're tuning in to me, I'm grateful and I thank you. And I hope you are blessed. We need to use our vote. We need to use our vote. What's happening to black people in this country is not nice. It's not right. Seriously. As I said last week, you come back from the carnival, you got that ridiculous man, Ian Duncan Smith, saying there should be more stop and search for black people. And I've argued this time and time again, but I'm black, so, maybe white people don't want to hear it from me. If you want to stop the war on drugs, make all drugs legal, and go to some of them fancy white people clubs, and you'll find drugs. Oh, you'll find drugs. You'll find drugs. I want to finish on race. We've got a few minutes left. Listen, I'm in love with Serena Williams. I think she's an incredible woman. I think she's an incredible example. The Williams family came from Compton. I think it's one of the worst places in the United States of America. And with the coaching of their father, they became the greatest tennis players of all time. Now, they're not the first black sisters to have success in tennis. They're not the first. But nonetheless, they have made huge strides in a world that was predominantly white. And to see what happened to Serena Williams was just wrong. It was just really, really wrong. Let me first of all, because I've made reference to it, let me first of all go back a little bit. The first pair of African American sisters to take tennis by storm. What were they called? Margaret and Matilda Peters. They were from Washington, D.C. They wooed the crowd with spectacular doubles. They played 30s, 40s and 50s. That's when they played. They were nicknamed Pete and Repeat, respectively. The Peters sisters played in the American Tennis Association, a league formed to give African Americans a chance to play competitive tennis at national level. Established in 2016, still alive today, the ATA is the oldest black sports organisation in the US. It's similar to the Negro Leagues in baseball. The ATA offered top black players who were denied access to all white professional leagues a chance to showcase their talents. The ATA sponsored tournaments were held throughout the country. Top players, though, didn't make a living from those tournaments. They were indeed stars, but not allowed to make a living from it. So those were the sisters, and there were other great black tennis players. So against that backdrop, we come to today and the phenomenal Serena Williams. I easily say to you, I think that she is the greatest tennis player of all time. However, she basically lost the 2018 US Open Women's Final. She was given a penalty for coaching. Now, let's be clear, you're not allowed to coach from the box. The umpire Carlos Ramos spotted her coach passing instructions during the game. As I said, Grand Slam, not allowed to do it, I get that. When Williams reacted to the decision, Ramos decided to penalise her further, and that ultimately cost her the game. Again, I'm a Twitter girl. I'm just saying to IMJUSSAYIN with the number 2. I'm a Twitter girl. So everything I'm about to share with you probably comes from Twitter. Might be a few other sources. But I'm tired of seeing Serena Williams always being brought down. I'm tired of seeing black women, you know. We push, man. We push back against what's happening to us. I'd be angry. If I'd had a baby, I'd work my butt off to get into shape. And then along comes this coach who penalises me. But here's the thing. Here's the rub. Men do it. They don't get penalised. And this is one of the things. Billie Jean King. Billie Jean King is a star from yesteryear. She even, a white woman, she even agreed. I think that Serena Williams was treated unfairly. Let me see if I can get a bit from Serena. Hold on. See if I can get something up from her. Might do.
We can never really go back, Serena, but if you could change one thing about what occurred, what would that be?
I don't know. You definitely can't go back in time, but I can't sit here and say I wouldn't say he's a thief because I thought he took a game from me, but I've seen other men call other umpires several things, and I'm here fighting for women's rights and for women's equality and for all kinds of stuff. And for me to say thief and for him to take a game, it made me feel like it was a sexist remark. I mean, like, how he's never took a game from a man because they said thief. For me, it blows my mind. But I'm going to continue to fight for women and to fight for us to have equal. Like, Courtney should be able to take her shirt off without getting a fine. Like, this is outrageous, you know? And I just feel like the fact that I have to go through this is just an example for the next person that has emotions and that want to express themselves and they want to be a strong woman, and they're going to be allowed to do that because of today. Maybe it didn't work out for me, but it's going to work out for the next person. Thank you, everyone.
The greatest tennis player in the world, Miss Serena Williams. I don't get it. I don't get it.
A year ago, you were not here. Very busy. What does it mean to return to the final stage a year later?
It's honestly really incredible. A year ago, I was fighting for literally my life at the hospital after I had the baby. So every day I step out on this court, I am so grateful that I have an opportunity to play this sport, you know? So no matter what happens in any match, you know, semis, finals, I just feel like I've already won, so.
No, it doesn't happen to men. Men can cuss and court, you know, it's okay. They don't take the match from them. This woman, she's incredible. And I think it's because Serena Williams is a woman, and I think it's because Serena Williams is black. And that's the truth. That's my opinion. She's married to a white man. I'm not saying that in any way. I just recognise she's married to a white man. I recognise institutional racism. And I just think that it's racist. I'm terribly sorry. I do. I am so moved by what's happened to Serena Williams. I don't think she should have been under fire. Okay, tell her off. Cool, fine. Deduct a point. Fine, I can live with a point. Why do you have to penalise her further? Why? How can you penalise the woman further? If you listen to some of the comments or read some of the comments on Twitter, what hasn't changed is the way Serena Williams has been policed and disrespected since the moment she stepped onto the court as a kid, decorated with beaded braids. Nothing has changed. Disrespect because she's black. These are some tweets I'm reading out to you. I'm terribly sorry, I should have told you. Watching hashtag Morning Joe panel undercut Serena Williams. Do they not realise how deeply offended she must have been to be accused of cheating during the final in front of the whole world? A champion athlete who has worked tirelessly to become a legend in her sport. She's the best tennis player in the world, but it's a white girl who earns more money. Many people call out the double standards involved in the decision, especially as numerous examples emerge of male players with aggressive behaviour walking away without being penalised. Let me see if I can pull one up for you. Let me see if I can.
Shouldn't be allowed that much time.
The ball was called out. He was talking to me. Come on. I wasn't allowed to challenge like after 2 seconds. The guy takes like 10. Every time. I can't allow that stuff.
Chase review reveals it was out.
Do you have any rules in there? Stop showing me the hand, okay? Don't tell me to be quiet, okay? When I want to talk, all right? I don't give a shit what he said. I just say he's waiting too long.
Challenge system, it's so flawed. But he cursed. He cursed at the chair umpire a couple of times in this last changeover.
That was a Federer match. There's more. You can't see this clearly, it's a match.
Wonderful stuff. And Del Potro not disheartened by the previous point. What a great rally again.
Incredible stuff. I mean, the slice on Federer right in the corner was incredible. But how about the angle there from Del Potro? Look at this shot. Right across there.
I'm sorry you can't see it.
So now,
but what happens is he shouts right there,
in the crowd
shut
in the middle
up.
of that rally, and I think that's what Federer was referring to.
So
What
right
he's been
there,
able to do to the other side of the net in all those years where he dominated. Another forehand.
okay, you wouldn't see that. Racket smashed on the floor. You hear the booing?
I don't think I've ever heard Roger Federer getting booed and whistled at, ever.
So that would be Roger Federer. So you heard the responses, right? Throws the racket down, stamps on it, breaks the racket. All this aggressive, outrageous behaviour. No points deducted. Nobody loses. You get a black woman there, and we're talking about the baddest tennis player out there, and what happens? What happens? This black woman, this girl who came from Compton, this girl who clawed her way up, this girl who's worked very hard for what she does, she gets the match taken away from her. I ask a question. Has anybody fired an umpire? Has anybody fired an umpire? I'd love to know that. If you know the answer, I'm just saying to IMJUSSAYIN with the number 2. I just don't get it. Men can be aggressive in tennis and still come away with the championship and make wonderful records and be these great individuals. You have a black woman doing phenomenally well. She's come back after having the baby, and it was a dangerous time for Serena Williams when she was pregnant. So here's this black woman. She's come back from having a baby, and lo and behold, what happens to her? She gets penalised. And it's not just because she's a woman. It's because she's a woman, and it's because she's black. And I have real problems with that. And it just seems to me that these things are getting worse. Why aren't we making more noise? When was the umpire? Why aren't we sacking umpires? What's going on here? I don't think it was just a sexist umpire going off the rails. By the way, I just thought the way he behaved was absolutely and totally wrong. Sexism was a huge part of it. I'm not arguing with that at all. I'll tell you why it was sexist. Because you had a woman asserting herself and saying no. And when she asserted herself, she was penalised in a way men are not penalised. That's why it's sexism. Why is it racism? Because I don't think it would have happened if it was a white player. I think that, I don't like this word unconscious bias, but I think that her being black has a huge role to play in it. I really do. The match should have been amazing that 2 women of colour were playing. Doesn't matter who won or lost, though. I was backing Serena. And yet, that game, as far as I'm concerned, was marred by a man. Because he made a call. Once again, men making call for women. I know some of you may find it really difficult. But understand that men, and I've played you examples, shut up, who you talking to? You heard some of that. I didn't make any of that up. This is men talking to the umpires. There were no points being deducted for that. But there is this black woman doing her thing. Now, she's playing for a tournament. She's playing at the height of her game. To me, it was a minor infraction. And I think that Carlos Ramos turned it into a calamity. I think what he did was particularly nasty. And I have to ask myself, was it just because she's a woman? Just because she's a woman? To me, and you've heard me use the expression, it's misogynoir. This is what black women experience. This is what happens all the time to black women. It's common. I think it's because of who she was. So, thank you, black feminist Moya Bailey, for coining the term misogynoir, because black men are also misogynistic. But isn't it funny that throughout today's show, there's been this theme. And part of the theme has been, when you look at the dominant forces in society, it always seems to be white men. I find it disheartening in 2018 that this is where we are. But unfortunately, it is where we are. Serena Williams gets criticised for her athleticism. God, I wish I was as athletic as Serena Williams. Serena Williams had a match taken away from her. And I do think she's an inspiration to us all. I think she has every right to be upset. Maybe it's time that we didn't have men refereeing, umpiring women's tennis matches. This woman's a huge star. I'm not saying one ought to do favours for her. She doesn't need one. She's a woman that speaks up for equality and justice. I'm so upset that she's lost the match. Not because of anything she did, not on merit. The woman is phenomenal. She's spectacular. She's outstanding. But she lost because the man decided he didn't like the way a woman was speaking to her. Now I'm going to twist this slightly, and I'm letting you know that I'm doing it. He didn't like the way a black woman was speaking to her. And that's why Serena lost the Open, a title that she should have added to her belt to make sure that she is the most decorated player of all time, because she is undoubtedly the most phenomenal female or male tennis player of all time. I think she's incredible. And upon that there note, we have reached the hour of 6 o'clock. So it's left for me, as ever, to thank you for your time and attention here on Starr Radio UK. Thanks for tuning in. It's so appreciated. I look forward to same time, same place next Tuesday. Until then, stay blessed.
You could catch me.
Hi, you're listening to Roz on Starr Radio. Join me every Tuesday from 4 until 6 where we look at life in 3D and tackle the tough topics.
Don't you worry about tomorrow. How you feel right now? And don't worry about yesterday. Ain't everything okay right now? When you dance and clap your hands, I know you understand. And I'm coming, but I'ma go. Catch me if you can. Yeah. And listen to me, friend. This will never ever happen again. Not the same way twice. And you did what you had to do. The bright side of life being bad to you. It's never the same day twice. Don't you worry about tomorrow. How you feel right now? And don't worry about yesterday. Ain't everything okay right now? Right there. It's always right on time. Ah, this is it. Yes. And forgive me for not staying forever. But you'll never forget. No. You got to wake up and walk that walk if you want to get to me. Well, get on the floor, child. Let everybody see. Because this is a glimpse into what your life could be. Well, if that soul, sir, right now is all I need. Don't you worry about tomorrow. How you feel right now? And don't worry about yesterday. Ain't everything okay right now? Don't you worry about tomorrow. How you feel right now? And don't worry about yesterday. Ain't everything okay right now?
Online, on mobile, and soon on DAB. This is Starr Radio UK, the leading Afro-Caribbean radio station in London.
Thanks for listening. can't always be in control of what happened